What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. I hope you brought your tinfoil hats and your seatbelts and or booster seats because it is time to strap in. We have a lot to talk about today and I'm super excited for it, right? Last video we connected Demon Souls to the Dark Souls universe. Today we're going to be connecting Bloodborne to the Dark Souls universe, which is actually a much harder thing to do than I realized. So if that is interesting to you guys, please continue watching and thank you all for being here. We'll get right into the video, so I'll see you there. So for those of you who don't know, Bloodborne is a Souls-like game released by FromSoft between Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, and it quickly became a fan favorite, even getting the Souls-like genre changed to Soulsborne games, which is weird because it's the only game in all of the games that are Souls-like that has Born in it, but that's fine. People love this game for whatever reason. When I played this game, I didn't like it for various reasons, and I made a whole video on that if you want to watch it, but that doesn't mean I can't make positive content about it. It is still fun to talk about, and a good game at its core, so I have no problem continue talking about this, but for anyone who's like, oh, you hated on it and why are you talking about it now, it's like it's still fine, right? We don't have to go and hate on the game, right? It's good. The lore is super interesting, which is what we're talking about today, so I'm super excited about it. But again, just like our Demon Souls video, Bloodborne is owned by Big Sony, so technically and legally these games cannot connect, which is very unfortunate because they're all made by FromSoft, and I feel like there's definitely a common thread between these games, just like Dark Souls, how we're able to tie it together pretty easily. I think there's similar threads that we can pull and threads that I have found in the Dark Souls universe that connects to the Bloodborne universe that I'm super interested to talk about because they're all made by FromSoft, so I feel like they all sort of connect somehow, but legally, of course, they do not, so Big Sony, don't come for me. But before we get to the theories, we can start with some lore. We're gonna need it. Alright, so in Bloodborne, you play as a foreigner who has come to the plague town of Yharnam to join the hunt. Yharnam is a community that is centered around a healing church and the healing blood that it administers to its people to heal different ailments. However, this miracle blood has turned most people into beasts, bringing on a hunt to end the scourge, and you sort of play as one of these hunters fighting the beasts. Throughout your battles, you come into contact with beings beyond comprehension known as Great Ones, or some sort of hybrid known as kin, but through these journeys, it is revealed that the church has done some secret horde experiments to evolve humanity beyond its current state through communion with a Great One, right? And these Great Ones are not only the path of ascension, but I think they're a strong connection that we're going to use to the Dark Souls universe. So that is a general overview of the game for Bloodborne, but I just wanted to set the stage, and then we'll do the same for Dark Souls. So in a similar fashion, Dark Souls is packed with ancient beings as well, right? Demon Souls has this old one, Dark Souls has the Four Lords, Manus, the primordial human, the Archtrees, and everlasting dragons that are kind of these powerful beings that make up the mythos of the world, and your job as the player is to sort of hunt these powerful beings down so that you can relight a primordial flame and kind of keep this age of fire going that keeps the gods kind of in power, and you can choose to either keep that flame going or put it out. And there's a cyclical nature to the game where the fire keeps relighting on its own. Even if you choose not to, someone else will come along and you're kind of stuck in this cycle. And then Dark Souls 3 is where you can kind of choose to break out if you want to finally. So how do we connect this more modern Victorian eldritch horror setting to this fantasy world of Dark Souls with dragons? From my deep research on Reddit, I have found that there are two ways that people try to connect it. The first theory, which I think is a more simple theory, right, a more A to B connection, is the Painter theory. So in the Dark Souls 3 DLC, there is a character that is introduced called the Painter. The Painter lives in this magical world inside of a painting known as the Painted World of Ariandel, and this world is starting to rot as the outside world is also fading from existence. This world is mirroring that by rotting. However, the Painted Worlds have a special way of burning away the rot and kind of starting new again. However, the occupants of this painting have decided to let the world that they're in, this painted world, just rot on its own so that everything kind of goes out of existence. And you are sent into that world to bring fire to burn away this rot so the painting can be kind of redone and renewed and there can be a new world. And that's where this painter comes in, is this painter has the ability to paint new worlds. However, it needs the blood of the Dark Soul. So you have a mission to go out and you essentially fight this guy called the Slave Knight Gale, who also is hunting for this pigment, right, the blood of the Dark Soul, to give to the painter. However, it drives him mad and he just starts consuming everything he can find, and you eventually have to go fight him and take the blood of the Dark Soul from him and bring it back to the painter. And once you do that, the painter is able to create a new world. And a lot of people think that this new world that he is painting, since it has to deal with blood, creates the world of Yharnam that is so focused on blood, right? We know from item descriptions that Ariandel, kind of since it's the painted world of Ariandel, the sort of king there, the leader, is the man named Ariandel, who is currently persuaded by a champion of Ash to stop the fire and continue the rot. And to do that, he knows that the world is painted in blood, so he uses blood to sort of suppress the fire from continuing. So we get this link that these worlds painted in blood, there's a huge significance on blood already, so it follows that another world painted in the blood of the Dark Soul could definitely bring about Yharnam, which is a community and world built around blood, right? So it's not a big stretch, it's a fair connection. However, there's one item description that definitely makes me not lean towards this theory, and it's really kind of stupid, right? There is one helmet in the Bloodborne game, part of the Yahar'gul, hopefully I said that right. The Yahar'gul set, the helmet description tells us that this helmet is a reminiscent of a warrior from a previous age, and thanks to Wikipedia, they have already found out that this helmet is worn by executioners in the Huntsman's Copse of Dark Souls 2. So this definitely makes me feel like it was put intentionally, right? They didn't just reuse a asset and got caught and then sort of we pieced it together, right? This seems like, since it's in the item description, it seems like they put it there on purpose to link the two games together. So this is why, as easy as it is to connect the painting and just say that painting created Dark Souls world, right? Quick A to B sample. I think this shows that it doesn't do that in fact we have to look to a different theory, which is the sort of Age of Man theory. So I prefer this theory not only because of the item description, but also because I didn't do all this research to connect A to B. I'm here to go from A to Z and make connections where none should be, and, you know, kind of increase my insight, if you will. So I like this one because it's a little bit crazier. So let's get into it. To start, we must go kind of further back in time in the Bloodborne universe than the events that I was talking about earlier in the video, right? Shocker, right? A lot of the lore that we talk about happens before you ever played the game, right? This is a common thing in these games. So the Bloodborne lore tells us that before the current age of humans, there was an ancient race of powerful humanoids called Pthumerians, right? Hopefully I pronounced that right, but I'm gonna go with Pthumerians for now instead of Ptahumerians. So these Pthumerians were led by a queen Yharnam, right, which is where Yharnam gets its name. However, this civilization essentially created the labyrinth beneath Yharnam, and they stumbled upon the Great Ones and kind of were the first to come into contact with these eldritch beings and discovered the eldritch truth, which drove them mad, right? So they kind of remained underground to protect the Great Ones, and their physical descriptions are kind of these lanky, pale human-likes. Like, if you look at them, they kind of just are these lifeless sort of creatures, which will be important later. But basically, the Queen of Yharnam goes on to have a child with the Great One Odon, something like that, and this Great One has sort of ascended beyond the need for a physical body, so their child also is formless, right? And this is, again, going to be important later. But that's about all the lore that you need to know, that there's this ancient beings, or this ancient race of humans who came into contact with the Great Ones and sort of interacted with them and were driven mad and had children with them and stuff like that. Eventually, after that, Yharnam was built above this labyrinth and named after the Pthumerian queen. So now that the Bloodborne world is sort of set up more completely, right, how do we get from the Dark Souls universe to this Bloodborne world? Well, I think there's two plot lines that we need to follow in Dark Souls 3, right? There's the tale of Osiris, the Consumed King, and sort of the journey of the Ashen One to its final choice. So to start, right, the tale of Osiris, the Consumed King, is more about this line of ascension, right? So ascending humanity isn't like super prominent in Dark Souls, but it definitely pops up quite a bit, although it's not the main focus. Osiris was the old king of Lothric who held the duty of relinking the fire. He fathered two children, Lorien and Lothric, and he kind of dreamed of leaving his fire-linking responsibilities to his youngest son Lothric as a worthy successor. Lothric, however, turned out to be born pretty weak, kind of ill and sickly, and was incapable of becoming a Lord of Cinder, which drove Osiris into a frenzy. So he decided to find a way to ascend himself sort of beyond his being so that he could have another child that would be a worthy heir to essentially relinking the fire. So he found his answers in the ancient scrolls of the Grand Archives, where he became sort of enamored with the power of dragons, especially the teachings of Seath the Scaleless. This obsession with his teachings and his spells and his powers, right, kind of led him to partially turn into a dragon resembling Seath himself. So he's kind of this lanky, pale dragon with thin wings and odd tendrils on his head and neck, which this physical description I think is going to be very important later on as well. to keep that in mind. So Osiris, with his new form and power, returns to have a third child who is named Ocelot. And Ocelot, which is another important part here, right? Strap in, get your tinfoil hats on, is a formless being that Ocelot carries in one arm when the Ashen One encounters him. And this is a good place, before we get into theory, we can kind of see where I'm going here. If you don't, we will clarify it later, but this is a good place to transition to the second plot line. Since we just mentioned the Ashen One, we will go into the journey of the Ashen One so we can get all our facts out on the table before we start jumping into theory and connecting dots. So while there are several paths in the Dark Souls 3 game, the path we are looking for mostly, and we're most interested in, is the journey to becoming the Lord of Hollows. The Lord of Hollows ending sees the Ashen One usurp the First Flame and lead the Hollows into a new age, right? It is important also to realize that when the Champion of Ash obtains this power of the First Flame, right, he has powers similar to the Painter, right? We know the Painter uses the Dark Soul and the power of Flame to create this new painting. And by usurping the flame and using the Dark Soul, right, that is how you become the Lord of Hollows, is you kind of expand your Dark Soul, kind of have this same power as the Painter, so then it's easy to connect that you also would obtain the power to create a new world in this Age of Darkness, right? You have similar powers. So this new age would then be populated by you, the Ashen One, and all of the Hollows that are following in your wake, right? All these undead beings. Now, with the setup complete, we can bridge the gap between Dark Souls and Bloodborne. So to start making these connections, we need to look at the stories of Ocelot and the Ashen One kind of in parallel as we go into this new age of man, right? So as we said before, right, Ocelot is kind of this formless child who was created by Osiris in this dragon form and two deities, so he's kind of this elevated being. So I like to think of Ocelot as this first being to ascend to a higher place, right? His formless nature and connections to ancient power is very similar to Odeon in Bloodborne, and so either Ocelot meets other eldritch beings as he has ascended, and he kind of entangles with them to give birth to the pantheon of the Great Ones in Bloodborne, including Odeon or Odon, whatever his name is, or over many ages, he becomes known as Oedon and makes the other eldritch beings that we meet in the game by mating with other physical beings of the Bloodborne world, right, in this kind of primordial time. The reason that I like to make this connection is because Ocelot's father, Osiris, right, he also resembles sort of the Great Ones. If you look at the Moon Presence looks, Ebritus looks, sort of these Great Ones, they're pretty similar in nature, and it wouldn't be far to assume that Ocelot, if they come from his lineage, that there's a part of that sort of dragonness in them all, right? They all have these weird wings, they have these weird tendrils that are kind of like the essence of being an ascended being, right? So I feel like it's not hard, even physically, to make a connection between Ocelot, Osiris, and these Great Ones. But anyway, while Ocelot is intertwining with the Eldritch world, right, the Ashen One is doing his own thing with his bride Henri, right? They are seeking to create a new civilization with their undead subjects, and over many ages, these beings become the Thumerians, right? I already told you that the description of the Thumerians are kind of these lanky, lifeless forms, which very much resemble the undead hollows that we've seen throughout the Dark Souls series. So I think it's pretty easy of a leap to make that these Thumerians, this ancient civilization, would come from, after many ages, right, this hollow world that has expanded into the rest of the world, right, under the guidance of the Ashen One, right? He probably goes out and creates a new world, and then these hollows are out there in the world, and these are the Thumerians, this ancient beings. And then these two worlds collide, right? The Thumerians eventually discover the children of Ocelot and gain this knowledge of the Eldritch truth. And then that's kind of how we lead right into Bloodborne, right? And then in regards to the Scourge of the Beast, right? Osiris was genetically, as we know, predisposed to fathering sickly, ill children. So I think this would have been passed on, right? This sort of genetic coding would have been passed on to Ocelot and then to his children. So I think we can then say that this Ashen blood, which is this corrupted old blood that the Healing Church ends up giving out to the people, that turns them into beasts, right, comes from this corrupted blood of the Osiris bloodline, right? So we can even explain how the Scourge of Beasts happen, as well as how the pantheon of Great Ones, these eldritch beings, kind of came into being through the story of Osiris, consumed king, and then how the world is filled with people comes from the Ashen One, right? The hollows that he leads out into the world, right, become the Thumerians, these ancient people, and then eventually we are led right into the events of Bloodborne. So in summary, starting from Dark Souls 3, we have Osiris the Consumed King, who becomes so obsessed with having a more powerful heir that he ascends himself sort of out of his own godhood and becomes half dragon, half deity, has a child, this sort of first evolved being that has ascended out of this plane of existence. And then while that is happening, we have the Ashen One leading the Hollows into a new age of man, and then these two worlds collide and give us this connection to the Eldritch and to the humans that drive everyone mad, and then we get the world of Bloodborne as we have it today. And because the Osiris bloodline was possibly sire ill/sickly children, then we get this corrupted blood that creates the scourge that is present in the Bloodborne universe. Hopefully that all makes sense. I did a lot of looking into this, so hopefully I have explained it all very well. Again, I really like making these types of videos. I really found out that this is fun to do, right? Because you're not just researching one. There's so many different lore videos on each game individually, and then being able to go through all those and research the stuff that's already been made and try to connect these two worlds together, right? It's a ton of fun for me. I hope you guys enjoy it. I know, again, it's a lot of reaching stuff. At the end of the day, we compile a lot of facts and then just try to connect them. So it's a ton of fun stuff. I hope you guys liked it. And as always, have a great rest of the day. I will see you guys in the next video.